So we're going live. We are going live, and I think we are live. And hello, everybody. Welcome to the live stream, and welcome to Donkey Kong Remix live stream on the web. And we are joined by the creator of Donkey Kong Remix himself and Donkey Kong for the Color Computer, none other than Mr. John Kowalski, aka Sock Master. How are you today, Mr. Sock Master?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I'm good too, and I'm delighted to have you here. But that's not all. We have a bunch of. It's really this is the foreigner edition of my live stream. So we have Sockmaster in Canada. We got Fedor in Denmark. We got Bill and Curtis also in Canada, and then I got Nick Morentis all the way down under in Australia. G'day, yeah. And looks like Bruce Moore just joined the chat. Hello, Bruce Moore. And Bruce, if you want to jump into the Skype call, you're welcome to. So we're here taking a look at the greatest thing to ever happen to Donkey Kong since Donkey Kong. And this is Donkey Kong Remix as being played on an actual real live Tandy Color Computer 3. I don't know how well you can see it down here in the corner of the screen, but this is a real CoCo 3 with 512K. And I also happen to have the Sega joypad adapter connected to it that will allow me to connect like an Atari or Sega style controller, and then connected to that I have an actual Wico controller, which is close to an arcade stick. And you want to tell us a brief history of the kind of inspiration and genesis behind Donkey Kong Remix and what brought it to the Color Computer 3 and eventually real arcade hardware?
Yeah, it's kind of long to explain. So in 2007, I had the crazy idea that it would be interesting to port the actual arcade game Donkey Kong to the CoCo. And I really put a lot of work into that because it's almost an impossible thing to do. It was on the borderline between what I thought would be possible or might not be possible. I wasn't sure whether it would even work out. But it did work out, but I had to cut some corners to make it run reasonably smooth, because it's just one CPU on the CoCo, and it has to do a whole lot of things, especially when it's emulating it. It's using a lot of CPU power to emulate things rather than to do things directly. So I had to code it like super insanely clock cycle efficient. After a while, I just gave up. I've done enough. I can't work this forever and ever to try to get every single clock cycle possible out of it. I mean, I did all I could given a reasonable amount of time, and so it came out. Everyone liked it. Then life got busy, and I didn't do much on the CoCo for several years. And then suddenly I decided, well, I miss developing on the CoCo, and maybe I'm not ready to do a complete thing yet. But if I take the original Donkey Kong that I did and just improve it to the way I wanted it to be in the first place, to try to make it smoother and run better, it would be an exercise in getting my feet wet again. But while I was doing that, I got a little carried away and I started changing things around. So what if I modified this? What if I modified that? I made a new screen. What if I just turned everything upside down? So the first screen that I did was the reverse barrels stage, where you complete the regular barrel stage, but like in the reverse order. Your path is kind of backwards. Mm-hmm. And that puts a twist on the game. Everyone's used to the game the way it originally was, and then suddenly you have to think about things a different way. So then I did the next stage and the next stage, and I did 6 new stages, and they all have like a twist on the original gameplay. So my figuring was, well, everyone knows Donkey Kong, everyone's familiar with Donkey Kong, and if we twisted everything around, you could the game would be like poking fun at everything you know about Donkey Kong and turning it against you. So if you're really good at Donkey Kong, all of a sudden this game is going to twist things around, and it's like you have to learn the whole game from scratch again because everything's upside down.
Right, right.
And I made it smoother. It's still not perfect. I mean, I would have really liked to make the game always 60 frames per second, but that's like impossible.
Okay.
Without external hardware assistance or something.
Even with the 6319?
If I encoded the thing entirely for 6309, it would probably come pretty close.
Yeah, because I think right now you just basically kick in native mode. I don't know if you're using any other specific instructions.
It's not doing much specific for 6309. It's just native mode.
Okay.
And that's because, well, there's an awful lot of code in there. I'd have to rewrite the whole thing from scratch.
Oh.
Wow. Well, I'm sitting here watching it the whole time, and it's absolutely impressive game. And so your conversion of Donkey Kong to the color computer, I guess that really you had to learn the internals to the game. You had to learn the logic and everything else. So I'm sure that helped give you some insight to what to do with that logic to make this newer version. And the version we're going to play here today is your original version you wrote for the Tandy Color Computer 3, but this version is now available as well for people to purchase if they own an original Donkey Kong physical arcade cabinet system. You can then sell them something to upgrade that to Donkey Kong Remix, correct?
Yes.
And then that version is a little bit better, or maybe a lot better, because it's running on the real hardware, which has more capabilities. So the challenges you faced here with speed and frame rate and stuff, those challenges are gone. So you're able to let the software breathe a little easier running on all of the hardware it needs to work. And so this was the first version. There is now an actual version that can be done on physical arcade hardware, which I would love to get one day. I've got a couple of life goals. The first life goal is going to be just to do halfway decent at this game here because it's freaking hard. And then I have some new life goals, and those are going to be to get copies of original Donkey Kong cabinets so I can get these kits here to play the remix versions of them. Because not only does the remix include all the new levels, but it includes the original levels too. Now, on the real hardware, when you choose your startup screen, can you choose to play classic mode versus remix mode from that same screen, or do you have to boot it differently? Or
the kit that I made, you can switch between original Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Remix. So if you just want to play Donkey Kong, you hold down the jump button, and it'll switch to Donkey Kong.
Okay.
From there, you can hold down the jump button. It'll switch back to Donkey Kong Remix.
This is on the fly, not during like a cold boot or anything?
It's on the fly, but it only works when the game is sitting in attract mode.
Okay.
You can't hold down the jump button while you're playing.
Right. Okay, so there's a way to switch that way. That's cool.
So yeah, you don't have to turn it off or go through menus or whatever. You can switch back and forth. When I did Donkey Kong Jr. Remix for the arcade, well, wouldn't it be smarter if the one game also allowed you to play the classic screens in their regular order without having to even switch ROMs?
Okay.
So that game it's a little more refined in that respect. But there's another big reason for that. Donkey Kong is really quite broken. The game has a lot of bugs in it.
Donkey Kong Jr., you say?
Yeah, in the arcade.
Okay.
Most people won't notice this, but there's a lot of little bugs, and they make the game pretty frustrating. So the first couple of months that I was working on that, I was just going through the original code and fixing bug after bug, and it just never ran out. There was always more bugs to fix.
Can you give us an example of one of those bugs? Like, because I'm obviously didn't play it enough to even be aware of the some of the bugs in Donkey Kong Jr.
If you're in the Mario's hideout screen,
okay,
which is the one with the sparks that run around, if you climb down the vines on the left side that are right above the one of the center platforms, and then you move to the right, you can make Junior walk right into it. Like, he'll teleport into the platform. He won't be on the platform. He'll be in it. That's a pretty significant bug if the game is got broken things in it. Where Mario is releasing the sparks at the top, if you keep walking into it, he's going to fall through the floor.
Wow.
It's simple as that. He'll get stuck, and the game will lock up. Generally, those two things nobody will ever actually do in the game, so I don't think people encounter it very often, because normally you're trying to climb up, so you wouldn't be climbing down those vines and into the floor.
Right.
The end, you wouldn't be walking towards Mario because the exit's right there, so you jump to finish the screen. But another thing is the springboard on the springboard bird stage. It's supposed to be when you push the button, when you jump on it, it makes you like a super jump. But there's a bug where it only registers the button press half of the time.
Ah, okay. So
that would be frustrating.
I've experienced. Just wondering if it was just me. Okay.
Yeah. So you jump on it, you push the button, and you fail your jump. And you go back, and because it's 50% of the time, there is a possibility that you can go back and try it again and again. You get the bad coin flip 6 times in a row.
Yeah.
It's pretty frustrating.
Now, these bugs, did you discover them playing the game, or did you discover most of them through going through the code?
The significant ones are well known. Since I released Donkey Kong Remix to the arcade, I'm like participating in the Donkey Kong community at the Donkey Kong forum, and so yeah, everyone tells you, or they're all talking about how Junior is really broken. But a lot of bugs that I found, nobody actually knew about. I guess they don't happen, or there's another one. You're climbing the vines, and if you change directions, there's a very bad lag time when you're trying to change directions, and it makes it hard to, avoid things or even time your movement correctly. It's not something you would even notice if you're just playing, but if you're trying to play competitively or trying to play well, it'll be frustrating because it's not responding to your joystick inputs the way it should.
Wow.
So there's a little bug in there where it's not keeping track of the timers controlling your movement properly. There's tons of things, and in the end, I must have fixed around 100 minor bugs, but it's like they're everywhere in the game.
Wow.
So do you think the game was rushed or something, or just a programmer that wasn't as experienced, or?
Yes and yes. Donkey Kong was subcontracted by Nintendo to another company, and they had professional programmers, and they made Donkey Kong, and it's like well programmed. When Donkey Kong became successful, Nintendo kind of reneged on their contract and started backstabbing the company to collect all the money for themselves. So suddenly they're on bad terms. So they can't hire them again. They went one worse there. They took Donkey Kong. They took the ROM. I guess the other company sent them source code, at least printed source code. By looking at the code in Junior, comparing it to Donkey Kong, it's like Donkey Kong Junior is a hack of Donkey Kong. But if you look real closely, it's like they didn't actually have. It's not assembled. It's patched. Everything in there is patched. It's not assembled as a whole.
Oh, okay.
So I guess they only had paper source code, so they could only do modifications to insert some code, replace some code here, but they couldn't reassemble it, because then if you reassembled it, everything would move around, and nothing moved around. Everything was still in the same place.
Wow.
So it's kind of like the hack Microware had to do with the basic ROMs, because they couldn't get the rights to just reprogram basic?
Exactly like that. Yeah, so Nintendo at that time did not have programmers. So I guess they hired some inexperienced people and told them, we need this game real fast.
Wow.
Because, Donkey Kong was a super hit, and
Sure.
we need to release something as fast as possible. So they rushed it. They were inexperienced. The coding is pretty awful. And I had no idea what I was in for when I was doing this.
Wow.
And it was super frustrating to fix it and to deal with this totally illogical code.
That's
So,
almost
but-
ironic that you mentioned that, because playing the game as just as a casual person playing a game, it doesn't seem buggy or rushed. It seems like a, well put together game and sequel. I don't find it surprising, but I didn't find that to anything that entered my mind playing the game, 30 whatever years ago.
Hmm. Yeah.
Can you shed some light on the history behind the Donkey Kong 2 and 3? I mean, they're officially the sequels to Donkey Kong.
Donkey Kong 2.
Donkey
Yep,
Kong
and-
2
and
Junior
Donkey
is
Kong 3.
Donkey Kong Junior is Donkey Kong 2 technically.
Is the official sequel. If you're talking about D2K, that's definitely not official. That's kind of like what I did with Remix. It's a guy, Jeff Kulchiki. Ironically, at the same time that I was reverse engineering Donkey Kong for the CoCo, he was doing that, reverse engineering Donkey Kong to make his new game.
I'm talking about the arcade Donkey Kong 2 and 3.
There is no Donkey Kong 2 though that I'm aware of.
Thought there was.
Well,
No, Junior is the Donkey Kong 2. Donkey
Jun-
Kong 3 is that one with the little spray gun or something?
Nope.
Unless I'm... yeah, the
D2K. Donkey Kong 2 Jumpman Returns. That came out in 2007.
right. I'll have to look it up.
That's not Nintendo. But Donkey Kong 3 is Nintendo. I guess their programmers were a little more experienced then, but maybe not at the level of sophistication of creating something like Donkey Kong.
mm-hmm.
And at this time, I guess they were in legal trouble because they got caught out releasing Donkey Kong Jr. as a hack. So they don't own this code. So
Wow.
they got in trouble for even releasing Donkey Kong Jr. So any game after that, I guess, they had to make from scratch. So they couldn't use the logic or whatever, or the code from the original Donkey Kong series. So they made a brand new game from scratch. And I guess at that time, they were still new to programming. So an easier kind of game to make is a shooter. So it's like a space shooter, but with the Donkey Kong theme.
Yeah, I don't have very many memories at all of ever playing Donkey Kong 3. It was probably a forgettable game compared to the first two as far as the style and everything.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't want to start playing yet while you were talking because it's getting to be noisy and I don't want to mix what you were saying with this. But are we ready for me to jump in and see how badly I can do in the game now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Well, I
Mike and I are
definitely-
waiting with eager anticipation. on
Yes, and I certainly appreciate you taking the time to explain that to us and for all the work you did to create this, because it is, to be able to play the real Donkey Kong on our color computer, it's a pretty amazing accomplishment, and it's definitely a source of joy to be able to do this. And this is a game I have tried to play a few times. I've tried to record a video for this to add to my CoCo video collection, and until like maybe yesterday, I could never figure out how to clear the first level in this game because it is extremely challenging. But as you can see here on the first board, as you were mentioning, you changed the arrangement of the platforms, which also changes some of the physics of where the barrels go, because they're going to roll in the direction of the platform, and you kind of have. You would know better as to when they decide to roll left or roll right. But you know, as I'm standing here, I get concerned in which direction they're going to roll.
Compared to the original screen on Donkey Kong, this one here, you have to mentally keep track of way more variables. Because the barrels come back up. You have to think in, 3D. Well, you have to think every dimension. In the original game, it's more what's right in front of you here. They can come any direction, basically. So you have to keep track of the whole screen simultaneously. And I'm like, I know.
Yeah, I think I need to stop sharing the screen sound because your sound was breaking up on me, Stockmaster.
Okay, so you want to?
Okay, I'm still playing the audio through my stream, but I'm not sharing the audio through Skype anymore. I don't know if that can you guys?
Yeah, that smoothed it out.
Okay, yeah, because as you were speaking, you were kind of cutting in and out, and due to no fault of your own.
I have the world's worst internet. I really do.
It's not dial-up, is it?
It's not dial-up, but there's no wires. I live in a small town, and there's no wires coming here. So it's essentially cell phone internet.
Oh, wow. Well, you sound pretty clear.
Yeah, if it's LTE, it shouldn't be too bad.
It's not downright terrible, but it's nowhere near what everyone else gets.
I have a question for you. What has the reaction been from the actual arcade people? Like I know Billy Mitchell and a few others have actually played it. I was wondering what kind of reactions have they had to it?
A lot of them are really enthusiastic about the game. It hasn't quite picked up much momentum in competitive playing. Maybe because, well, it's not. It's not a big release. It's just an independent guy made a game. Maybe over time that'll build up. People like it, but like you guys, some people think it's frustratingly hard. But I know the secret, and the CoCo version is more unfair than the arcade version. But there's so many hidden rules in the logic of the game. If you figure them out, you can do well in the game. You have to put in the time, and you have to analyze the game and put two and two together. So you have to invest some energy into figuring things out to do well at this game. That was the whole point of making it in the first place, because everyone's used to Donkey Kong, everyone's played it a million times. So this is like a new game where you have to learn everything from scratch all over again.
No doubt. Like this one here. I got here a couple of times today. Oh, crap, dude. This new imagining of the first time we hit the rivets phase. I got here a couple times today, and I just couldn't figure out how to get back down to the right.
Yeah. In retrospect, if I were to do this again, I would make some things more obvious. It's when you're making a game, it doesn't always occur to you how obvious or not certain things are to somebody who sees it fresh, without context. In the arcade version, I helped this out a little bit. There's a bonus stage that appears before one of these screens, so you can see a demonstration of how the floors fall.
I do remember one of the people that reviewed your arcade board and the actual hardware got really frustrated on the screen too, because they couldn't figure out what order to pull the rivets, and they kept getting marooned and stuck in various spots. When the game first came out, there was a lot of people who thought, this is ridiculously impossible. Over time, more people are noticing, well, no, it's not really impossible. You just have to figure it out. So
yeah,
if you don't give it a chance, and some people are impatient, and they won't.
I don't know anybody who's impatient in my house.
I was just going to say hi, Steve.
They'll get impatient and they won't give it a chance, and they won't get to the point where, oh, they won't get that light bulb moment where I can do this, and then it works.
Right.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, in designing this, were you designing it for experienced players only when you were designing the levels, or were you trying to make it also just for the general players who never played Donkey Kong before or hasn't played it in a long time, and it just, because you know the insides and outs of the code so well, you made it more difficult than it had to be?
It was specifically designed with somebody who's very familiar with Donkey Kong.
Okay, so it was to give them a new challenge, and it wasn't meant to be a beginner's game.
No. When I did Junior Remix, well, you know, I had a retrospect from what happened with this game, and so with that one I went in with the intention to make sure that nobody gets the feeling that the game is being unfair. And that was, I think, the problem. If you think the game is unfair, you get frustrated at it. And
Yeah, and then you just quit playing it.
so I was really careful on Junior, even though everyone does say it's hard. And again, I'll say, well, it's not really that much harder than the original game. You just have to pick up the tricks. But
Yeah.
the people this time around are saying, yes, it's really hard, but it's fun. And they always add the "but it's fun." And with Donkey Kong Remix, some people, you know, they said
Oh,
it's
crap.
hard, and that was it.
This is backwards, dude. What the heck? Oh, crap. I'm like, where the hell am I? What is going on here? It's backwards.
The game specifically.
I've never made it that far before, so I didn't know what to expect. That was history in the making right there.
I guess I should stop yammering and maybe give
No. That's okay. That's okay. I'm listening while I play here.
which doesn't help with your concentration if you're trying
No, that's okay. I'm used. Listen, I'm used to Curtis. Compared to Curtis, you are easy listening.
No way.
So
You play without concentration anyway.
yeah, that's true, Nick. Thank you.
I guess I'm curious though, like when Billy Mitchell and some of the the quote unquote professional Donkey Kong players have tried playing it, how well did they do? Like, did they grow frustrated too, or did they figure it out fairly quickly because they're so used to the original?
It depends on the personality of the player. I've noticed it really depends on the personality of the player. Some people like challenge. Some people like to challenge themselves, and they want the game to be challenging, and they want the drive that it's to figure out. It's rewarding to figure out the game, and those people really like the game. If you like a game to be predictable, so to do well at the game, it would be like a matter of perfecting your timing, or if a game is all about timing, or doing this and this and this in a specific pattern, those people will hate this game because it's way chaotic. This game is all about chaos and making decisions on the fly. You change your strategy because the state of the screen changes so fast that you need to make decisions non-stop.
And so for the semi-professional Donkey Kong players, the ones that go in competitions every year, was it most of them in for the challenge, or are most of them like pattern finders that just try to get a high score?
When it comes to Donkey Kong, most of the professional players are in for the challenge. Donkey Kong is not patterned at all. It's every single game. You can play 1,000 games in a row, and no two games will ever be the same. So it's all about on-the-fly decision making. It's like chess. It really is like chess, but high-speed chess.
So in that case, it sounds like the professionals would have really liked your modifications.
A lot of them actually do. It's just there's more prestige in playing Donkey Kong. This is a nobody game, you know.
Well, I would argue that statement. I would argue that this is the next best thing to hit Donkey Kong since Donkey Kong. It's a pretty damn good game.
Yeah, and if you play the arcade version, it's even better. Like this, looking back, I kind of consider it the prototype. It has some flaws in it. Oops.
Oops.
So I did this one first, and like I really looked at it and say, what can I do to improve it? And so the arcade game is a lot more refined. Even though it's got the same screens and it looks like it's doing the same thing, some of the logic has changed, and it's just it's more balanced.
One of the things I like about it too is that the platforms actually fall, which they don't necessarily do in the original arcade. They just kind of stacked up from one frame to the next. So you went from the individual platforms to a stack of platforms in the bottom. This one you actually see the animation of the platforms falling, which is a little bit more realistic.
Climb down the ladder just a little bit. Just
To lure them down?
No, well, all you need to do is climb down like 2 pixels, or 1 pixel really, and you'll change the decision making that will allow them to go down.
Okay.
If you stayed where you were, you would have stayed there forever. But if you climb just 1 pixel down, then you have to climb down and get past it.
This was the hardest thing for me to figure out until you told me how to get to this guy here on the far right-hand side. But yeah, watching it fall down like that is a very cool animation feature.
Yeah, which I think at the original it was only on the intermission itself that they finally fell, wasn't it? Or did they just instantly jump?
They just instantly stacked on the bottom.
The first time people see that, and then it's kind of interesting. You see the reactions, and then they kind of get a smile. It's like, oh, well, this should have been like that all along.
Shoot! I wasn't expecting that fireball.
To the left right away. Don't just go to the left right away and climb up the ladder. You'll make it before he comes up.
And traditionally with games, you have a bitmap screen of some sort. Donkey Kong didn't have a bitmap screen, did it?
No.
Don't follow me.
It's all tile based.
Tile, is it?
Yeah.
There's a way to bounce jump up on that platform there, isn't there?
Yeah. You just pick the right distance and jump up, and you'll be up on the next girder.
This is it's a complete reversal of that level, which is.
You could also try taking
it
the
screws with you.
ladder on. Yeah,
It deceptively looks the same until you try to play it, and then it's like, oh my god.
Acts very different just because the layout is like reversed, or the layout's the same, but yeah, the path is reversed.
Yeah, and you have these long ladder climbs to get up, so you have a lot more time for things to go wrong.
I hit my head on the barrel above me.
You're climbing. You're walking down a slope rather than up in many cases, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's entirely backwards. You're almost always going down instead of up. So the barrels are coming at you from behind instead of coming towards you when you're running up. It's backwards in like so many ways.
I do enjoy hearing the birds chirping in the background.
Oh, that's me. Yeah.
It's very soothing. No, it's good. It's very soothing.
I live in the country, and
I need that Zen moment here. Okay,
it's the only reason he hasn't rage quit yet.
Oh my god, I have never seen this level before. Oh my god, stay away from me, fireball! Holy crap!
Got a clearing. Okay. Just go up to the left side, and you do. Wow. Okay. Unlike regular Donkey Kong, you have to make it all the way up to the left. But he's not going to crush you on this.
No, but I started going too fast and I bumped into him. Okay.
In D2K, if you make it up there but don't have the timing right, Donkey Kong will crush you against the side. But in this one, I gave you a chance. You can survive that.
Oh, he changed direction on me, you a-hole. Well, this is another life goal here, and I'm making it to this remixed. What do you call that level? Do you call it the cement factory or the pie factory? Because I've heard it called both.
Technically, it's the cement factory, but nobody calls it that. Everyone calls it the pie factory.
Yeah. 16K. It's a cool game. It definitely is, and I've gotten further now than I've ever gotten before.
Yeah.
So how many levels are in this? Like, do you have the original levels in as well as modified ones in the CoCo version?
It's 1, 2. There's six new screens plus the 4 original, so there's 10 stages.
And the arcade mod is the same number of levels, or did you add more than? I know you got bonus stages and stuff.
In addition to that, there's 3 bonus stages. And in the arcade, well, in this one here too, the screens vary a little bit. So when you see the same screen the second time around, something will have changed. And I added a bit more changes in the arcade version, so the game really...
Like changes in the logic or changes in the screen layout itself? Like I know the original one, like the angle of the barrel on the girder screen will change depending on how far you're in. You mean like that, or did you actually change like some of the placement of stuff?
The placement of things. Some ladders will move around. On this screen here, some of the platforms will move around. So it makes it so you have to take a different path or go through a different way, or it changes it changes the way you have to complete the level.
Okay, I didn't realize that. That's cool. No, I have to try it again.
Yeah, so in the original Donkey Kong, you just had the same screens over and over and over again. And I wanted to make it so that the game gives you something new for quite a long time. And so there's more screens, and then there's changes in the screens, but then there's other things, some subtle changes that happen also, and so you don't get the same game. It's never the same. Things only really start repeating, and not entirely exactly, because something's going to keep advancing all the way to the kill screen.
I was just about to ask you still have a kill screen in there?
Yeah, and there's a special kill screen. Instead of just running out of time and dying, the game cranks things up to 11, and there's like a bajillion barrels coming at you. I figured, if you're going to make it to the kill screen, you want to go out with a bang, and it's like watching fireworks, all the barrels coming at you. So it's way more entertaining to watch.
Now, have you actually made it to this kill screen on your own without like cheating and setting your level up higher? Like made it all the way through?
No. I had to play through it just to see that everything worked properly, but I gave myself extra lives. I'm not that good a Donkey Kong player. I mean, I'm better than most people, but compared to the competitors, I'm not good.
What is the screen number of the kill screen?
The actual number, it's on level 22. I think it's 136th screen, if I remember correctly.
Wow, you got to be playing for a long time to get to that.
Yeah, in regular Donkey Kong, if you're just blowing through all the screens, it'll take like an hour and a half. If you're trying to get points, it takes longer, and your game can be 2 hours long. In Donkey Kong Remix, because the stages are more complex, a game can actually be 3 hours to reach the kill screen.
Now, have you seen any of the competitive players actually get up that far on the remix, or?
As far as I know, the game's only been kill screened once.
Wow.
But I got to see that live, and that was really, really impressive.
Who did that one?
Somebody named Ethan Daniels. He is, I'm not sure what rank exactly. He might be something like the 15th ranking Donkey Kong player in the world. There's like really strong competition for Donkey Kong.
Yeah, I mean, they've made movie documentaries on it with, the going back and forth between several of them.
New lifetime achievement here.
Yeah, you got your high score.
And the game Mario Brothers in the arcade, is that similar hardware?
Yeah, it's almost identical hardware. It has more colors than Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. hardware, but it functions pretty much the same way. And the CPU is just a little bit faster, but so it's just a minor revision of the Donkey Kong hardware.
So that'll be your next project?
I'm looking at several things, and I haven't decided yet. And I'm not going to tell anyone anyway, because it's a year before anything, concrete shows up.
Yeah, you don't want to promise vaporware or Kintax.
It's like when I did Donkey Kong on the CoCo, it's like nobody knew anything about it until April 1st,
Yeah, and then a lot of people thought it was a fake.
Yeah.
I even remember when some of the YouTube demos went up and some of the commenters saying, this isn't a CoCo. This is all lies. You guys played this in MAME. And you and several others had to go, no, this is running on real hardware. Come over to my house and see it if you want.
So technically, this would be the best Donkey Kong port on any personal computer of that era anyway.
Any 8-bit for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's convenient, being able to jump across these guys. Oh, don't hit the thing above your head, though. Yeah, just trying to figure out what you can do and where you can go is a challenge.
That screen, has several different paths you can take to complete it. So you have to make a decision based on what the fireballs are doing. Which path is the best one to take? So a lot of players will
Yeah, I'm going to follow Donkey Kong over now this time.
Have you had any feedback from people of other platforms looking at it, thinking, gee, this is better than CoCo version and whatever?
It comes up in some forums.
I frickin' made it. I followed Donkey Kong the whole way. Oh, man. This is nerve-wracking. Okay, so this looks like normal, but what am I to expect here now? Laser beams?
The screen is pretty much normal.
Okay, it's a little, yeah.
I think when a lot of the people who were talking about, which is the best Donkey Kong, I guess maybe they're jealous or something, because they would disqualify this version because, well, it's not from the 80s. So, well, because it's not official, because it's not actually from 1983 or whatever, or 82, it doesn't qualify in the running for best 8-bit Donkey Kong.
Oh. And yet, in actual fact, the code in there is from 1983, in essence.
Well, it's
based on the original.
Yeah. So it's the only totally arcade authentic 8-bit version, home version. Other ones are close. There was a Commodore 64 version of Donkey Kong that came out last year, which is also based on the original arcade code, so they did something similar to what I did.
Okay.
But the graphics are changed around. They're more modern looking, and I think the screen layout, the dimensions have to be changed around, to make it fit on the screen. So it's not exactly the arcade. It's as close as you could do.
On the CoCo, did you use the maximum 225 scan lines on this game?
Yeah, this one uses 256 by 225.
By 225, yep.
And what was the arcade, 240?
It was 224. 224 by 256. So it's like the opposite of the mode that I'm using on the CoCo, because they had their screen rotated.
Yeah.
We don't have that, so I had to compress the graphics a little bit, so they're a little bit squished.
Yeah, you can see that on the ladder rungs.
Yeah, but interestingly, the CoCo doesn't have square pixels. The pixels on our screen are a little taller than square. So even though it's compressed to 7/8 height. The proportions are actually, even though they're squished, they're really close to the arcade original aspect ratio. In some emulators, it'll turn out fat because they're displaying pixels one to one. So it actually looks nicer on a real CoCo than it does in most emulators.
I can't believe I've gotten as far as I've gotten today.
Now, one thing I remember when you originally released it, you were really hoping that a lot of other people would, try to do the same thing and port some direct arcade games, and that didn't happen for several years. But now we've actually been seeing like there's a Pac-Man port, there's a Space Invaders port.
Yeah.
Tutankhamun, basically got ported sideways without sound at this point. Was there any that you expected people to do that you haven't seen yet that you were kind of hoping somebody else would do, so you didn't have to spend all the time on it?
Based on what would be more likely to pull off, I thought more 6809 arcade games would have actually been done. I know Tutankhamun is a 6809 game, and that's why it's like really exactly the same, except rotated sideways. If it got finished with the things that are different or incompatible redone, it would make a really arcade true experience on the CoCo. I mean, even the color sets on the CoCo are very compatible with the original game.
So you're expecting like some of the Williams stuff? Because I think they used the 6809 quite a bit, didn't they?
Yeah, like everyone was interested in Defender. I guess a lot of people still are, and it would be pretty cool to see the real Defender.
Right.
The other Williams games will be more complicated because they had blitters, and there isn't much hope for the 6809 to be able to do the code and blitter operations of those games like Joust and Sinistar. They might not be able to run at full speed.
6309?
6309 would help. Well, by my calculations, it's similar to like Donkey Kong calculations, where it's possible is like borderline between possible and impossible. Well, I mean, I know it's possible, but I mean, to be smooth and fluid also. With Donkey Kong, you have an advantage that I don't have to display every frame. So if the CPU can't keep up, I can skip frames, so I don't have to render all the frames, and that saves time, and then it can catch up with speed. With the Williams games, you can't do that because it's a bitmap screen and the CPU has to draw everything, so you can't skip routines or things will not work on the screen anymore. So there's an advantage to using tile, to porting tile-based games, because it gives you a bit more flexibility in speed control or frame skipping. But there was games like Super Pac-Man is a 6809 game, and that would probably work really well on the CoCo.
Okay. Well, now we got more people actually doing these kind of ports here. I'm hoping to see some pretty decent stuff, because I mean, some of the late 70s games should be fairly easy to port. Those were running on like 8080s and Z/Z80s.
Anything on an 8080, the original game performance is so slow that it should be a piece of cake for the 6809 to keep up with.
Even with sound samples, etc. added.
Yeah, the 6809 is pretty zippy. The Z80 on Donkey Kong is 3.5 megahertz, and the CoCo's 6809 is only 1.7 megahertz, and here it is, keeping up pretty good and doing all sorts of extra stuff that the original game did not have to process. The 6809 can run circles around the Z80.
Oh,
I think Nick would attest to that.
Another rivets phase.
Especially the 6309.
Another rivets phase.
Now that I'm a new fan.
So, Steve, are you hooked on the game now? Because
I am hooked on the game now because I can play it to a degree. It makes a difference.
Keeps presenting you with new challenges.
It does. It certainly does.
I want to play it too now, but I've got to go to work now.
I thought you programmers were independently wealthy.
Oh,
All those Lamborghinis that Nick has after selling pop stars.
Yeah, I got 3 of them now.
well, no, the plane
should be-
was modeled after his own personal aircraft.
Well, yeah, I'll go down to Toys R Us and see what they got.
Actually, that's something I wouldn't mind asking you, John. If you want to answer, you don't have to. What are you doing for a living these days? Are you doing programming on as a commercial thing aside from doing add-on boards? Like, is that your day job too, or?
I program, but I'm not programming. I'm not in the video game industry anymore.
Oh, okay.
I design circuit boards, so like electronics and circuits, and often enough they have processing on them, and I program the firmware on the boards too. So it's more mundane, but it's related. It's not that dissociated from my old video game career.
Yeah, because you did like Tron ports and stuff like that, if I remember correctly, or
Yeah. So I used to make. So the company I worked for would get a license from another company. So the Tron was Disney. I did some of the retro game packages. So I've done things for Disney, Midway, Atari, Namco, Sega. Anyway, yeah. So those are big companies.
Yeah,
so they
definitely.
So it's like originally Nintendo's subcontracted another company to make their games. So these companies, when it's not their prestigious A product, they'll subcontract smaller companies to make things for them.
And any thoughts of seeing a John Kowalski created game, like something that you create, an original game? Because you're obviously the master of ports.
I have the ideas to do things, unique things. But everything takes time. It's like, even right now, it's like, yes, it would be nice to make something on the CoCo, but I have a job. And now I've got this distraction of having to build hardware for arcade things, I don't have free time for anything. But yeah, I do have the itch to make something, but it's
just finding the time.
really hard to justify dumping so much time into something.
Well, if you did decide to do an original one, and obviously we don't want to put any undue pressure on you, we definitely would pay for it. I think you'd actually get some pretty good sales, at least to reward you somewhat for doing it. It wouldn't be like all the free donations you've done in the past, like the Mod Player and Twilight Terminal. And
Yeah, pretty much everything I've ever done has been freeware or
That's right, and that's why I asked if you're going to do something original, because then you'll be able to charge for it, and I'm sure people would buy it.
Well, I could have
There's no
charged
doubt.
these things too, but my prime motivation has always been just to do cool things.
and to push the hardware to its limits.
Yeah, to do the impossible. That's my goal in life, really.
So far, you're
should get
succeeding.
OS9. That's impossible.
I also
I
have,
have to put one in.
I have to have an interest in the subject.
Diplomatic, yes.
Well, Nick has an interest in it. He just has an interest in bashing it. That's all.
You're going to get a lot more entertainment out of OS 9 that way than what it's capable of doing on its own.
Steve, you're having trouble with this screen, I see, huh?
I am. I understand what I need to do. It's just now being able to do it.
Okay, well, pretty
I
much got
flipped
it
the
made.
switch. I changed the elevator direction.
Yeah, now you have.
And
Now you're dead. Oh my.
now I'm stuck like Chuck.
Okay, I'm gonna direct you here.
Okay, direct me.
Bottom left rivet first,
Okay.
and then the next one above it. We'll take the
Okay.
hammer. Or don't take the hammer now.
take it now when I jump over?
Well, you couldn't, and now you can't. Well, yeah, you could, yeah. You could if you time your jump, well, or just forget it. Crush that. Don't take that hammer. You'd have to do a back jump over this rivet. So, wow, you made it. Now take the hammer. Walk onto the elevator, but carefully.
Okay. That was pretty cool. I'll see if I can get there one more time. These are like lifetime achievements here for making it to this far in this game here.
But it is pretty interesting. You're progressing. You're getting further each time. So that was your high score, your personal best?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, by far.
I want to play it now just to get ahead of Steve now. I can't let Steve actually be on a higher level than I am, so... That's a disgrace.
Richard Cavell is with us in the UK, and he says, I have a great respect for this. It must have taken some effort, but it's technically impressive. And I agree with that as well.
It was a lot of work. The sort of things that I had to do, some of the programming in here is so convoluted, it's ridiculous. To make something as absolutely fast as possible, you have to program things in a really non-intuitive, strange way.
What are the odds that some type of legitimate deal with Nintendo could be struck to where this could become an official thing?
Zip.
I don't think so because of all the legal problems I mentioned at the beginning of this stream.
Right, but you would think that enough time has gone by, and Nintendo is certainly big enough and financially able enough to somehow bury that hatchet with a big fat check.
The technical problem for them is they don't own this.
Okay.
They lost it.
Well, then reach out to whoever does. Who is the owner? Do you know that?
Whoever does is Ikegami Tsu something. It's a technical hardware. They make video equipment now. They have no interest in video games anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all in Japan. It's like, how would you contact them? How would, there's no, it's not obvious. I don't think there's a way that Donkey Kong is so mired in legal issues that it's really complicated.
So when you say Donkey Kong, do you mean Donkey Kong, this version of the game?
The arcade.
Not the Mario.
Yeah. You will notice anytime Nintendo releases retro compilations, it is always the NES version of Donkey Kong that they'll re-release. They've never re-released the original arcade game.
Because legally they can't.
Yeah.
But they still own all the other Donkey Kongs, the Marios, the Donkey Kong Country from the NES. That's theirs. It's only this first version of Donkey Kong.
And so they own the trademark Donkey Kong and the
the
ID,
trademark.
but they don't own the code.
Yeah.
But
Sell them this code.
Yeah, so there's a couple of hurdles. You would have to get the approval of the code owners first and foremost, and then there's the trademark part with Nintendo themselves, and they typically don't play nice with any fan related stuff. They have a lot of cease and desist. Like any fan created thing that's ever been created, they usually do a cease and desist against that. Any classic Nintendo game music that I've tried to play in any of my videos, I've gotten YouTube copyright flags for because they still are keeping the copyright alive on the music from like from Zelda from the NES. I can't play that game without the music doing a copyright flag, or any of the original Mario Brothers and Mario Worlds and stuff. So they're real tight and not very community friendly.
Development.
Oh yeah.
Traditionally, Nintendo has been pretty lenient about fair use or small things, which is why I originally chose Donkey Kong, because I figured, well, they don't care.
Right.
I know if you try to do anything Pac-Man, they're going to come at you right away.
I haven't had anyone knock on the door yet.
Well, I guess if you're small enough not to be noticed, if you're not disturbing the giant so much, they're not going to bother.
Yeah, I
not
don't
poking the
think
bear.
I'll disturb the giants.
And I would imagine if the project was a for-profit based project, it would be a completely different story too. But if you're just doing like what Glenn's doing with his blog, where he's just going through the process as an experiment, and he's not trying to sell it too, that changes the dynamic.
Yeah, in that case, there's really not much they can do. There's no reason for them to come after you.
I guess it's also because, well, in my Pac-Man's case, it's not any of the original code. It's all a revisioned version that I coded from scratch. But the Pac-Man, the Donkey Kong, it is the original code.
Yeah, and so there's.
Well, legally, is that true? I mean, you based it on the original code, but you didn't write a Z80 emulator. You ported the code to the 6809. You emulated the sprite chip and the sound, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even look at the code.
I think he's talking about Sockmaster's version.
Oh, sorry.
My version?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there isn't actually the original code in here because it's all been rewritten, and so it's rewritten by hand, and it's not the same anymore, but
it's
it
functionally
was
the same. But you did
from
emulate
the
the sprite chip and the tile thing, and that you did write an emulation layer for that, if I understood right.
But I would guess that the sprite emulation and the graphics and whatever emulation, that hardware is composed of generic off-the-shelf components. There is no patent or whatever on that. So there's no reason that you couldn't do that.
It's just the code because you based it on their code.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Man, I'm sure there's a lot of legal stuff there that there's just no way to legitimize this without including the original owners and Nintendo, and that seems like that's going to be a next to impossible feat. Might be the one thing Sockmaster can't pull off.
Have to make a Donkey Kong remixed where Mary's a lawyer.
I mean, I could make a sequel to this, and I change all the graphics to something else, and then it's free and clear. It wouldn't be Donkey Kong anymore.
Right.
Well, even your remixed one, I mean, except for having the original 4 screens, it's less like a Donkey Kong than a lot of the 8-bit clones were back in the day. So, I mean, I don't know if Nintendo challenged a lot of those, like Donkey King or the various other ports on other machines that weren't official.
I don't think that they actually did, unless it was like really selling well.
I mean, we heard from Chris Latham, I think he said that Tom Mix did get some sort of a letter, and that's when they changed it from Donkey King to The King. Just because it was too close to the name or something? I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I think maybe they were worried that they might, and that's why they changed it. Not that they actually did.
Oh, okay.
I think my abilities are going downhill and my carpal tunnel is setting in. So this will probably be the last time we play it because it's hard to believe we've been doing this for an hour.
We did see quite a lot of screens there.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, a lot more than I was expecting to see watching Steve play.
So, I told everybody in the chat that Steve's going to kick butt, and
I'll keep practicing.
And you're proven right yet again.
he has.
And you like doing the impossible, so getting Steve to play a game well, you achieve that too.
Listen, I don't call myself the good gamer, Stevie Stroh. I just call myself the original. And make no claims of competency of any sort. And I walk right into that barrel. Yeah, what I'm doing right now is I'm helping him debug his collision detection routines here, and so far they're working really well. So.
Yeah, I see that.
It is. I mean, Donkey Kong is just one of the most classic, iconic games there was. The thing that, why does Donkey Kong still popular today? And when you look at certain games like Space Invaders is popular for the fact that it's old, but there is no soul to Space Invaders. Donkey Kong has this character here, this lovable little guy here, whatever his name was. He was an underdog, against unsurmountable odds, and you all of a sudden inject yourself into the character, where some of the earlier games were not really character-based games. Pac-Man technically is a character, but even then he was kind of he didn't have a huge personality at first. But Mario, as he would become, I think he was originally called Jumpman, right? And Mario has become this character. And I think that is part of the success. I think another thing, just my opinion and observation, is that when you compare something like Donkey Kong to even Pac-Man, even though the things changed in Pac-Man, it was the same screen. Where Donkey Kong introduced us to 4 different screens, and they rotated over time. So that was a somewhat new feature as well. So it wasn't exactly the same thing over and over again. I think those two things, and just the design and the style and the wellness of it, just have made it to be this time-honored treasure of a game,
I think you're right on the franchises. I mean, Donkey Kong was the start of a franchise. Pac-Man was to an extent too, and character-based ones, Zelda, whatever else, seem to be the ones that actually get franchises. But your generic shooters, they don't. I mean, I guess Defender technically had Stargate, or Defender 2 as it was also known, but that wasn't really a franchise per se.
Yeah. If there's something interesting or intriguing, there's story development, somewhere they can go, then it can be expanded. If it's a shooter, then you just have more of the same, or more complex, or more things, but it can't really go too many new directions. So Jumpman became a plumber, and then he went off into his fantasy world with mushrooms and tunnels and...
Yeah. Well, even Donkey Kong Jr., I mean, as much as you said it was, a kind of a carefully coded thing, I mean, it did pick up the theme. Now you're playing King Kong's, son trying to rescue him, because at the end of Mario, of course, or at the end of the original Donkey Kong, of course, you rescue the girl and presumably you imprison Donkey Kong. So it actually is a sequel.
Junior is interesting in that it's a reversal of the original game. So the protagonist becomes the antagonist, and the game gets turned around. It's like upside down. It's kind of like Remix here, where everything
right
backwards.
Everything you're comfortable with is backwards.
As a concept, Junior is interesting because of that.
Just the execution wasn't as good as it could have been.
Yeah, but at a glance, if you're just playing it a few times, and it's okay. But if you're really into playing it and you play it over and over, it really starts to get to you that things don't quite work the way they ought to. So for a casual player, Donkey Kong Jr. is a perfectly good game.
Right. Travis Pope just joined us.
Sorry, go ahead.
Travis Pope just joined us and says, what adapter am I using? I'm using the Sega gamepad adapter and then a Wico controller. And Bosco chimed in saying, I love how John's achievements are so impressive, but he has no ego. That's cool too, yes. Sorry, Curtis, cut you off.
That's okay. I was just making a comment that I can't even remember what it was now. So.
You guys were talking about Donkey Kong Jr. and the reversal of the...
Oh yeah, I was going to ask about, you knew that there was some bugs. As you said, quite a few of the bugs in Donkey Kong Jr. were well known, and I presume that when you started to do the remix, you just planned to fix those and then start adding levels, etc. Yeah. And then you started finding all the other bugs. And how much extra time do you think it took you to try to fix all that up before you started the new levels, or did you discover them as you went along?
Well, yes, I had to reverse engineer the code to figure out what it's doing so I can change it. Um, so as I'm going through all the code to figure it out, I keep finding more and more and more bugs. And no, I didn't expect that. And it did set me back a long time. I was probably I spent, I don't know, 2 months just fixing the thing.
Oh wow.
And the crazy thing is, nobody's going to notice all these fixes. There is no way any one player will notice. You'll notice some of them. But like I said, there's 100 things that I fixed in there.
Wow.
They're all subtle. Well, many of them, but there's some of them are pretty obvious. But most of them are subtle things. So you won't specifically notice anything's different. But I found when I play the classic level order in the Remix engine, it just feels nicer.
Yeah, I haven't played it, but I watched your video and I noticed that it seemed faster, it seemed smoother, and the sound was noticeably better. It's a higher fidelity sound, a richer sound of the music and the sound effects and everything else.
No.
No?
The speed is identical, and I didn't touch the sound. I guess it's just because I had a good recording of it. I don't know.
Okay, yeah, it just sounded very, maybe, yeah, hearing it in the modern headphones versus the speakers or something, but it sounded very clear, very rich. And it seemed like, again, I just was watching the video, but it seemed very smooth.
Yeah, I learned a few tricks encoding YouTube videos to make sure when I'm recording gameplay that it comes out at 60 frames per second, and everything's much nicer on YouTube. Otherwise, a lot of videos on YouTube come out 30 frames per second, and when you're showing gameplay and how smooth it should be, 30 frames doesn't really cut it.
Right. Well, yeah, I think I'm done playing because my hand is about ready to give out. Mashing my thumb on this thing here. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. I've gotten further than I thought I would get, and I really appreciated you giving up your Sunday afternoon being with us here. Yeah. John Kowalski, aka Sockmaster, and definitely having Bill here and Curtis and Nick and everybody else that was with us.
Really well, considering you haven't seen any of those screens before. So
yeah.
Each one of them, you have to learn the trick, or the strategy to complete it. And so you see a new screen and you die, and then you try again and you get further. So it was interesting to see, you progressed further and further pretty much each game you were playing up until now, where I guess you ran out of steam.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to get in the old man cramp. My my arthritis is kicking in. Oh man, good times. This
is pretty much the way I envisioned the game should be. That you get set up with a new challenge, so you want to figure it out and complete it, and then you get a little further, and then you keep learning the new screens as they come. So you have to play a bunch of times, to get everything out of the game. So it's not just you play it once and then you're done. You've seen it.
Right. And that's the way any of the original games were, but they were just less complex in a smaller scope. So now we have got more complex screens with more challenging puzzles and a much bigger scale and scope of the game. So the learning curve has been stretched out significantly as well, but that just adds, I think, to the replay value of this, because I'm definitely inspired to want to continue to play some more and, maybe eventually get a long play video where I can get through all of the levels. When does it loop around? When do you know that you've gone through all the levels?
I think somewhere's around level 5, maybe 6. The level order in Remix A and Remix B and the arcade version, they all have different screen orders. So I don't remember each one specifically.
Oh man, it is such a nice little. It's a great piece of entertainment, and I certainly appreciate you doing it for us.
When you do see the same screens looping around, well, and then you've seen them all once. But
so for example, if I make it back to the arched screen, like that's the opening screen, is that an indication that you've looped?
Mostly, I think there's a chance that there'll be like one screen after that, because the screens have to come in a particular order to make the story work. There's the barrels, the elevators, the pies, the rivets. So they come in that order, or in the US order, they insert a bunch of extra barrel screens in between. So in some cases, there might have been where I had a screen type that didn't fit into the story, so it had to be pushed a little further further into the game. But I think once you've seen 10 screens, well, you've seen them all, but they'll be different the second time around.
Okay.
So it still goes a little further than that.
Okay, so even though the physical arrangement is the same, the logical process is going to be different, for example, or?
Yeah. It'll throw a few wrenches at you still.
That's good. That's good. So, I mean, you can definitely sink, like I've sunk an hour into it today, so you could definitely sink many hours into this before you've really not only experienced it all, but gotten somewhat proficient to where you could, kind of cycle through it all. So, yeah, that is pretty cool. It's beyond cool. Yeah. So yeah, I don't want to take up any more of your time today, but I certainly appreciate you being here. I don't know if anybody else in the panel here or watching has any questions for Sockmaster while we still have them before we go. But I just want to say thank you. I can't thank you enough for doing this. This was kind of a spontaneous thing we did today, and I'm certainly glad we did it because I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. Any closing comments or questions from us here on Skype?
I just want to say that Sockmaster is truly a master, and we appreciate all his work he's done to the CoCo community over the many years, really. So we're lucky to have him.
Yeah, I will second that and third that and 6809 that. You were mentioning, too, some of the projects you worked on for, like, Sega and some of the arcade stuff. You just got me thinking about, because when I did the video with Nick and we did Gatecrasher, which was based on your Gloom demo, I remember Nick saying that Gloom demo is something you did for a Game Boy game. So did you make an original game for the Game Boy system?
Well, I made Gloom for the CoCo just because there was a discussion on the list server, the CoCo list, that it was impossible to do something like that. So it exists because of that. But later on, there was a game project on the Game Boy Color. The Game Boy Color wasn't out yet, so I was working at the company. And so they wanted to make a Game Boy Color game to showcase, how much better the Game Boy Color is than the original Game Boy. So we were going to do a 3D game. And since I'd already done Glooms, I have some tricks to make a low-performance CPU pull off 3D.
Mm-hmm.
So I did make a game. It exists. It never came out.
Oh, wow.
Because the company that it was for got bought by another company, and the new management axed the project right when it was done. I mean, it was like the game was pretty much finished. There's just a couple of things to add, to make it complete. But yeah, then it got shelved.
So who owns that right now?
Does Midway still exists right now? It's Midway.
Okay.
But a few years after that, when the Game Boy Advance came out, there was the Tron 2.0 project. So they wanted a Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance game, and they wanted to have like bonus stages sort of in between the regular gameplay, and so 2 different types of those levels would be in 3D. The main game is in 2D, so there would be some, in between the story or whatever mode, there would be extra game modes.
Okay.
And so that is loosely based on Gloom. Well, it's based on the other game project, which is based on Gloom. It's a further refinement of it. So there is, yeah, you can get Tron 2.0 for the Game Boy Advance, and it's essentially, you know, the spiritual successor to Gloom.
Oh, wow. Very, very cool. You've got such an interesting history. So many different projects. I mean, we've probably only scratched the surface. One of these days we'll schedule a full-on Sockmaster retrospective and talk more about that if you're ever interested in doing that. There's so much history to talk about. This is just one of a million amazing projects, man.
Yeah, there would be more projects if I only had like infinite time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people
so
could.
many things that, you know, everyone wants to do, and it just doesn't happen because life is complicated. And there's not enough time to do everything.
All right, guys. Well, thank you all for being here. Bruce Moore was here. He says it's been fun. Richard Cavell was in the chat from UK. Same with Bosco was here. I'm not sure where Travis Pope is in the world, but Travis was here. I want to thank everybody who stopped by in the chat and everybody who was with us in the panel, especially our guest of honor, Mr. Sockmaster himself, the master. And that's so cool. I really appreciate it. I guess we'll go ahead and wrap it up. I just want to say thank you again. And thank you to everybody who was with us talking and everybody else who was here watching and chatting. And Chris X just says, thanks to you. You're welcome, Chris X. Thank you for being here. And we will wrap this up. This is actually now video number 199 for me in making color computer gameplay videos. And this is one that I have never recorded. Okay, Travis Pope says, I'm in Idaho of all places, the potato capital of the world, right? So cool. Yeah. So this is game number 199 for me playing on the color computer. I never would have imagined almost 2 years ago and almost 200 videos ago I would be talking to everybody here that I'm talking, and I would have been learning about games like this, like Donkey Kong for the CoCo 3. And there's so many cool things that have been done and have yet to been done for the color computer 3. It's truly a really impressive machine. And I think we're just getting started with what people are going to be able to do with this machine with its native hardware, not to mention some of the add-on hardware that's coming down the pike, like sound chips and you know, a possible new gimme chip that Ed Snyder's working on and stuff. It's just I think the future is still yet to be written when it comes to what we're going to be able to see come out of this amazing machine. And I'm definitely happy to be a passenger on this train here, you know, and see where it takes us. And you back, Curtis? You want to say goodbye too? All right, we're signing off, Curtis. Any closing comments or questions for Sockmaster before we sign off?
Just a big thank you for all the stuff he's done throughout the years. If you go back to his original like Mouse Maze game and Twilight Terminal, which I did use back in the day for logging on to ANSI BBSs, the mod players I still find impressive to this day. And that was another one that he originally thought was going to be impossible, and he thought he could only do it in the 639. Then he actually got a 6809 version of it working. It just I really like the way he's always pushed the hardware to its absolute limit, and is an inspiration for us all.
Fantastic.
Ditto.
Yeah,
all
always
right.
Eloquent Nick.
Always eloquent Nick, yes.
I was, just a very optimized comment.
Must be a 6 through a 9 comment, I guess.
All right, well, we're going to end this live episode here. I certainly appreciate everybody here, especially Mr. Sockmaster himself, John Kowalski, and everybody else. And we'll see you on the next CoCo whatever happens. And I've put links to Sockmaster's website and YouTube channel in the description of this video. I would definitely suggest you check out a lot of the videos that he's got there, especially the one for Donkey Kong Jr. Remix, since that one's hard to show without having the real hardware, but it's definitely worth the watch. We had a good kick watching that video because it's a cool game. All right, guys, we're signing off. Thank you all, and we'll see you on the next video. CoCo forever. Thank you, Sockmaster.